The Elder Scrolls is a series of games from Bethesda Softworks that embraces the open-world subgenre of gaming. Players left alone in large, fascinating worlds and given the impetus to find their own stories. They give us realms of dragons and wizards, uncertain prophecies, and political intrigue. It's an alluring melting pot / time sink of medieval lifestyle and high fantasy adventure. But can a game where the player can do anything, up to and including ignoring the story itself, really be considered literature?
I'm your host, James Tabor, and today we'll be examining the literary merits of Skyrim and why you shouldn't always go chasing dragons. For those of you unfamiliar with Bethesda Softworks, let me explain a little bit about their company. They forge worlds.
Arena, the first Elder Scrolls game, was jaw-droppingly enormous, being set on a procedurally generated continent called Tamriel. You're free to wander, potentially leaving the main story entirely in order to accomplish side quests or just explore and do whatever. Its sequel, Daggerfall, was more of the same, albeit with a time limit on the main story.
These games were excellent games because they give you an incredible amount of space to play in, but that's also the problem. It's too much space. To be good literature, the setting has to bear some significance to the story.
Remember Minecraft? On the PC, the game can generate land equivalent to 8 times the surface of the Earth, but without a driving narrative or some character motivations, it's just so much stuff.
Now, Arena and Daggerfall both had story and characters, with some clear-cut motivations in the second game. But back in ancient 1994, there were some pretty severe technical limitations, especially if you also wanted to procedurally generate a continent. You had to have the faith found only in hardcore gamers to get really sucked in.
Then came Morrowind, the third entry in the franchise. It did away with procedurally generating terrain and shrunk the size of the world down to a single island. In so doing, it became one of the most engrossing and beloved games of all time. Your character's entire reason for being in Morrowind was tied to the story, and while you were always free to take off on your own path, you still had a backstory that quietly influenced your available action.
Morrowind also introduced a standard for later Elder Scrolls games. The character always starts as a prisoner. Since it's never addressed, the player is free to decide whether the character was rightly or wrongly imprisoned, but the reasons behind their escape always help define them.
The fourth game in the series, Oblivion, had all the makings of Morrowind and more, with even more surface area to explore that was just as lovingly crafted as its predecessor. Now, it's just my opinion, but for me the game fell short of Morrowind's wonder, and not just because of some questionable technical decisions on the part of the developer. It's because Oblivion is set in your standard European world with plate-armored knights and robe-wearing wizards. Despite being larger, the world felt smaller with the addition of a compass, an objective marker, and a fast travel system. Compared to Morrowind's almost completely invented political and religious system, suitably alien architecture, and weird mass transit bug things, the setting of Oblivion is just plain bland as hell. Fortunately, as the fifth game in the series, Skyrim strikes a balance. It's based on very familiar Nordic principles, but remains suitably strange and mythical without resorting to bizarre leaps of design or narrative. The world is massive and intriguing. Everywhere you go, there's something to do and new people to meet. Quests are nigh infinite. Furthermore, as always, you can just wander around and take in some breathtaking sights, discover hidey holes filled with treasure, and piss off bears and trolls.
Which brings us to the story itself. In it, the main character, whoever you come up with, we'll get to that later, is the Dragonborn, a prophesied hero who can fight the dragons that have begun reawakening.
As you progress from prisoner to god-conquering hero, you're introduced to the ongoing civil war in Skyrim. The internal strife of various
I
guilds.
distinctly heard that lout in the tavern say it was a full shipment of furs. They should be worth a fortune.
You idiot. He said furs, not furs. It was a damn logging caravan.
And the random villainy of bandits and other ne'er-do-wells. The main story, of course, involves finding out why the dragons are returning and how to stop them. It culminates in a battle in the afterlife against Alduin, the World Eater and Dragon God.
But therein lays the point of this discussion. There's story literally anywhere, so why bother with the main one? If you escape from the tutorial level and decide to flip off Destiny, you'll still find yourself caught up in the Civil War. If you refuse to take a side, then there are guilds and other factions you can join. Don't want to do that? Even if you're just wandering, you'll run across people who ask for help in one-off quests. Maybe you can successfully avoid the story, but no matter what, you'll always find yourself in a story. Even if that story is you depriving the countryside of all its cabbages.
So who is the Dragonborn? Here we come to the game's weakest element, character. There are plenty of good characters around, some very interesting and dynamic, and the character creation stage is completely open-ended. You can choose to be any species or sex and control even the basest minutiae of your appearance. It's wonderful from the gameplay perspective, but awful for narrative.
Why? Because it limits the way a character can be special.
The truth is that it makes more sense for the Dragonborn to be a Nord, since the legend is tied to their homeland, Skyrim, and they have the ravishing good looks of a Viking. But you could be a Lizardman Dragonborn, and thus devote yourself to killing what I can only assume are your own distant relatives. Being able to go anywhere and do anything is really difficult for character development, since the character might not undergo the normal cycles of change and development.
But the game itself gives you plenty of opportunities to do so. The question is, does it still count if the player refuses the opportunity to create said arc? The answer is yes.
The character of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, for example, has numerous chances to change who he is. Once, he even takes the opportunity, but at the end of the movie, he's the same person. In Fight Club, Tyler Durden struggles with himself throughout the entire film. At the end, it's left very ambiguous as to whether or not he's succeeded in changing, or if he's the same person as he was before.
You met me at a very strange time in my life.
The thing about character arc versus story arc is that a character arc can end in the same place where it began. Granted, it's more satisfying if it doesn't, and that's why Skyrim gives you many opportunities to lead your character on an emotional journey, as well as a physical one.
Here's one example. Close to the end of the main quest, the dragon hunters that you've been assembling tell you that Parthenax, a dragon that's doubled as your confidant and advisor, was once Alduin's top lieutenant. If you want their continued aid, you have to kill him.
Make your choice, Dragonborn. You're either with us or against us.
When you speak to Parthenax, he admits that he once did evil, and that evil is in the heart of all dragons. Then he hits you with this line.
What is better, to be born good, or to overcome your evil nature through great effort?
Your mileage may vary, but for my own part, I'd stumped up the mountain with every intention of killing Parthenax. I wanted the support of my followers, and I had already spent the whole game killing dragons. What was one more? But once I heard him speak, I realized I didn't have the heart to do it. His words moved me, and I decided to keep him as an ally rather than cave to what the Blades wanted me to do.
This is also, by the way, where narrative surpasses gameplay. From the point of view of the game, it makes more sense to kill Parthenax, since you'll have more followers and access to more weapons and armor, plus a fortress hideout. There's no real bonus for letting him live, aside from a slightly different ending. But the game is full of moments like these, like the choice to steal everything that's not nailed down. It makes a lot more sense to do it in the context of the game, since you're the only person in the world who can actually use those resources. But from a narrative perspective, if your character is a morally upright individual, it doesn't fit.
In the end, Skyrim is what you make of it. Your character can be as simple or complex as you'd like. Interactivity like this is a strength of video games as literature that other forms lack. Books and films have no interactivity, no audience input. You can't make the choice for Tyler Durden any more than you can for Patrick Bateman. If I had to guess, I'd say that interactivity is what will ultimately guarantee video games a place as literature, and maybe they'll act as an example for other forms as well. Next week, we'll discuss Valve's runaway hit, the Portal series. Until then, game hard and game safe. I'm your host.
Nice. Okay.
Thanks for watching. The discussion continues in comments below, so feel free to join us. If you like our show, please like and subscribe. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, or even send us an old-fashioned email.